Ryan has worked all his life. He knew from an early age that no one would give him a happy future. He grew up in a poor neighborhood, worked part-time jobs wherever he could, and dreamed of only one thing: to get out of poverty. But he couldn't imagine that one day his life would change because of a man he wasn't supposed to love. That day, Ryan was working as a waiter at a private reception. The guests were rich, the outfits were expensive, the conversations were empty. And suddenly he saw her. Alex, the sole heiress to a multi-million-dollar empire. She was sitting at the table, bored, lazily stirring a glass of champagne. And at some point, their gazes met. Ryan hurriedly looked away, but it was too late. Alex stood up and walked straight towards him. "Do you always avoid people looking at you like that?" She grinned. Ryan swallowed. "I just didn't want to intrude." She tilted her head. "What's your name?" "Ryan." She smiled. "Ryan, are you always this serious?" He didn't know what to say. She was too beautiful, too unattainable. But something in her eyes made him feel that he wasn't just a spoiled heiress in front of him. Something more. After that meeting, Alex found any excuse to show up at the restaurant where he worked. She ordered tea, but hardly ever drank it. She raised an eyebrow every time he tried to pretend not to notice her. "You realize this is stupid, don't you?" he said one day. "Realize what, exactly?" "You and me." She grinned. "Did I suggest you be a we?" He couldn't find anything to answer. But when she left that evening, his heart was pounding too fast. And he already knew he was lost. But love between a poor lad and a rich heiress couldn't be simple. One night, as he waited for her at the club's exit, a man in an expensive suit approached him. "How much?" he asked coldly. Ryan frowned. "Pardon me? How much to pay you to get out of Alex's life?" He felt his fists clench. "I'm not for sale." The man grinned. "Anyone is for sale. Especially people like you." Ryan hated him at this point. But what he hated most was that he knew he was right. When Alex came to the meeting, Ryan already knew what he was going to say. "We can't be together," he breathed out. She froze. "What? You're from another world." "He can't give you anything but trouble." Pain appeared in her eyes. "Did you really think that?" Ryan clenched his jaw. "I know it." She stared at him for a long moment and then just turned and walked away. And he thought it was over. But a week later, there was an envelope in his pocket. Inside was a check that would buy him a new life. And a note. Years later, Ryan had climbed out of poverty. He had a business, money, the life he'd dreamed of. But every night he went to sleep thinking, what if he had stayed? And Alex? She married out of convenience. And only once, when she saw him on the street, she stopped for a second. Their eyes met. But neither he nor she said a word. It was love. But sometimes love isn't the end of the story, just a memory. It's been a few years. Ryan had achieved everything he dreamed of. Now he ran his own company, wore expensive suits, drove cars he'd once only seen in magazines. But every night when he was alone, her image came back to him. Alex. He tried to convince himself he'd forgotten her. But the past always finds a way to come back. He hadn't planned to go to the charity dinner that night. But his business associates insisted. When he entered the hall, he noticed her immediately. Alex was standing by the window with a glass of wine in her hand. She hadn't changed much, except for the tiredness in her eyes. And when she turned and saw him, for a second something real flashed in her gaze. But after a moment she took a step back and grinned at the man standing next to her. "I'd like you to meet him," she said softly. "This is my husband, Victor." Ryan held out his hand. "It's nice to meet you." Victor smiled back, smugly, like a man who knows he's won. "I've heard a lot about you, Ryan. Alex tells me that you were once good acquaintances." Ryan clenched his jaw faintly. It was a thing. He looked at her, hoping to see some feeling in her eyes. But Alex pretended not to care. And that hurt the most. Later, when the evening was almost over, he found her in the garden. "Alex." She flinched, but didn't turn around. What do you want, Ryan? Just tell the truth. She grinned. What kind of truth do you want? He took a step closer. Did you love me? Silence. She took a deep breath. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Alex turned around slowly. And in her eyes, he saw everything. Sadness. It's too late, Ryan. But she lowered her gaze. Because I can't change the past. What if we try to change the future? Alex looked at him longingly. Do you really think there's a future after all this where we're together? Ryan didn't know what to answer. Because maybe she was right. After a few minutes, Alex returned to the hall, to her husband. And Ryan stayed in the garden, looking up into the dark sky. He realized the main thing. Sometimes love isn't what keeps us together. It's what makes us let go. Months passed. Ryan thought he could live without her again. But every night when he came to the empty apartment, he caught himself thinking. Alex wasn't just a memory. She was a part of him. One morning, his secretary brought an envelope. No sender's address. Ryan unfolded the paper and read, I've always loved you. But you're right. We can change the future. I'm leaving. Alex. He reread the words several times. Her handwriting. Her decision. She chose him. Ryan learned that Alex had filed for divorce. There was no scandal. Victor cared too much about his reputation. But rumors began to appear in the press. Wealthy heiress renounces Lancaster name and moves abroad. Ryan knew what that meant. She'd given him a chance to find her. He ran in at the last minute. Alex was already going through security when he yelled. She froze. Slowly she turned around. Did you really think you could just drive away? She laughed softly. Did you really think you'd dare stop me? Ryan stepped closer. I love you. I know I do. And I don't want to lose you again. Alex looked at him for a long time, and then she just said, Then come with me. They took off. No plan. No promises. But with one thing. A love that was no longer impossible.